Hey everyone, welcome to Unique Ways with Thomas Gerard, an audio podcast. We have a really great guest on today, and I'll describe him briefly. He's a British graphic designer, filmmaker, and typographer. He trained at St. Martin's School of Art and the Royal College of Art, both in London. Please join me in welcoming Jonathan Barnbrook. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm looking forward to answering these questions, particularly because I've decided not to look at them that much before it.
Great.
So I'll know my own answers as well as hopefully you want to know my answers. So it's going to be interesting.
Great. And normally I say, are you ready for 20 questions?
I certainly am ready for 20 questions, yes.
Okay, question one. Tell me a little bit more about yourself. What do you do?
That's a good question. And I listened to a few of the other podcasts, and a lot of people take it as work. But, when you're a creative human being, the work doing other things, separation just doesn't happen. So all the time you're thinking about creativity. So I suppose what I do is try and be authentic and honest in what I want to say. That form takes graphic design generally. Sometimes it takes music. But that authenticity is the most important thing. I mean, I tend to work when I do graphics in the cultural area because I still believe that design, music, art still has a very positive role to play in society. When you look back, it's not the bankers, those kind of people which denote an era. Of course, they're important in the shaping of it, but it's the art which shows the spirit of the age. So I'm very happy always to be involved in that thing.
Great. And just a note for our audience, if you're interested in the most popular episodes, check out the episode with Eric Speakerman. It is our most popular episode. So question two, what's a key piece of knowledge that makes you different?
Well, I mean, looking or listening to the questions, I mean, there's a lot that's about me, and I'm not that kind of person, really. I mean, when I was maybe 21, of course, I was trying to push my creativity and my worth onto people, but now at 57, I just don't feel that need. So I don't have any big agenda to say why I'm different from other people. I'm only different in the sense that at this moment in this time, I'm a summary of all the experiences, all the people I've met, all the creativity I've done, all the books I've read, all the films I've watched, all the TV shows, every conversation I have. And that makes me different from everybody else. But then everybody is different. Everybody is a unique being at a certain second in time. So I don't have those feelings of superiority. I just think that every human being has that within them, that uniqueness and that difference, and that's a very, very celebratory thing, rather than having an ego which makes me feel like I'm a unique person in this world, because that simply isn't the right way to view it, I don't think. And I think, of course, when you're young, it's quite important to push your own agenda, but as you get older, it's very important also to change for your own personal happiness and to find your place in the world. I certainly don't do the same design work or creative work as when I was 20. They were much more motivated and full of principles that were black and white. Now I'm much older. I would say I see the world in shades of grey, and I'm a little bit more human and understanding. It's less about me. Often it's more about a positive response to the world rather than a negative response, which I think can happen a lot in a lot of the work that I've done in the past, which is political, I think. So I try and look at the better part of the world rather than shoving the negativity down people's throats all the time. So having said I'm not different, I've just explained how I'm different. So that's the contradictory nature of existence for you.
I love it. Question three, why this of all things? Why do you do what you do?
Because my art teacher told me to. when I was 15 or 16. I come from a very working class family, and it was normal to hate your job and to get yourself really dirty, covered in oil and grease in a car factory. And I didn't realize you could actually do a job that you enjoyed. Yeah, you had to hate it. You had to do it for money. You had to resent the people above you. There would be no way of advancing, really. But suddenly, learning about art when I was 15 or 16, a whole world opened up to me of different ways of looking at the world, of having a point of view, which is very important, because generally the poor don't. You know, I come from a poor working class family, and the poor are not listened to. So to realize that I could say something, and more, that people listen to it, and I could put it into work, and I could enjoy that process, was a revelation by looking at different 20th century artists that my art teacher showed me, Mr. Lewis. I should thank him. And really, that's what set me off on this. And it is a wonderful journey, and it makes you different from other people in the sense that you really, there's always something that's at the center of your life pushing you on. And that center is a creativity and appreciation of the world. So that's why I do what I do.
Great. And some people struggle with number 4, and the question is, what does your future look like?
Why do they struggle with it? What's the reason? Is it?
I think the
Sorry,
common perceptions about the future, the struggles.
I think, I mean, what I worry about is when people have difficulty with it, is that they're afraid to look at their own mortality. You know, I'm 57. Obviously, I'm not going to live as long as someone who's 20 years old. And who knows how long it'll be. You know, hopefully more than less. But the future looks happier than it did when I was 20, when I perceived how 50, 60 years old is. It looked quite miserable. But when you're that age, you're actually quite appreciative of life, of the things around you, much more, and of people, and just the process of doing, and the moment now. Whereas when I was 20-ish, I would have raced. You know, the work would have been the most important thing, getting the best work, and then sacrificing stuff for that, sacrificing family life, sacrificing social life. But now I often stop and say, isn't this great, what I'm doing? And that never happened before. So however long my future is, if it's as good as it is now, then I'll be very happy. And if I pass away, then I would have had a great life where people listened to what I said. I got to travel around the world. I got to meet some amazing people. I got to collaborate with some amazing people. So what does my future look like? It looks like I had a great past, therefore I have a future which is appreciative of that, what it takes. So nothing to be afraid of, nothing to get anxious about. What will be, will be. It may be short, it may be long. Really mind.
Perfect. So number 5 is unique to this show, we say, and the question is, let's talk about location. How does the notion of place play into what you do?
Oh, well, I live in London, and I've lived here since I was 17. It's 40 years, and I absolutely love this city. I mean, I love the idea of cities. It was always very strange when my family always wanted to go to the coast when I was younger. I just wasn't interested. Of course, nature is interesting, but all the beauty, the ugliness, the energy happens in cities for me. The culture, the lack of culture, the violence, the love, everything is there. And London absolutely is the the base of my work. It's the color palette, the grays, the blues. There's the word vernacular, which means building from the materials around you. And my typography, the language I use, the atmospheres I put into work are all from London. The music I love generally is from London. And it wasn't something I really understood until reading people like J.G. Ballard or Ian Sinclair, and the term psychogeography was coined. It's about how for me, it's about how a place emotionally will affect you when you're there. And it's not the conscious things. You know, go to a beautiful building and you're overwhelmed with the beauty. It's more, you go past a piece of signage from the 1950s and it's juxtaposed with something from the 1970s, and you're on a long journey and you're tired and the weather is dark. It's all atmosphere. And it all affects your psychology and it all feeds into your work. So that kind of thing is extremely important to me. And one of the things I just absolutely love doing is going on an aimless walk in whichever city I'm in. I do it in London once or twice a week. Just, you don't know where it will take you. You don't know what people you see. You don't know what details. For a designer, detail is everything. Of course, there's a big concept, but how a street sign was painted in the 1920s, the production methods used, how it is aged. These are all elements of beauty and psychology, which some strange way go into your work and create an atmosphere. I mean, one of the worst things about being a designer is walking down the street and seeing all the typographic mistakes made. But one of the best things is seeing typographic mistakes which happened in an era where you don't understand why they made that typographic mistake, and maybe that could feed into your work. So for me, place is absolutely everything. I'm a product of this city, and of course I'm a product of my time.
Great. So 6 is about beginning. So if you had to start from the beginning, what advice would you give your former younger self?
I don't know how other people answered it, but I imagine somebody has said this, is I wouldn't give myself any advice, really, because making mistakes is, although a painful process at the time, is probably, in retrospect, one of the most enjoyable things. The way you solve a problem when it arises is one of the basic fundamentals of creativity, no matter what area you're in. Maybe I would have partied a bit more when I was on my degree rather than worked hard. But apart from that, I would have fully thrown myself into all the mistakes that I made, because so many interesting situations arose from meeting people by chance and making the wrong decisions work, that kind of thing. But always something happens, and always you learn something. And in the same way, you can't control what people think about you, what people say about you, so don't bother. I think you can't control how your life was, and those decisions, if you made them differently, may not have been much better at all. So looking back in that way is not something I ever really worry about. I don't worry about my legacy either, and the mistakes I've made in relation to that. What's more important is, again, what I said at the beginning, which was the element of authenticity. Have you been true to yourself? And if you haven't been true to yourself in the past, there's no need to regret it. The best time to do something is now, always. So that's what I tend to set a center on, rather than giving myself advice. I mean, I don't know what advice to give to other people, so it's even more difficult to know what to give myself, because it's completely relative, I think.
Great. And what's a day in your life like these days?
What's a day in my life like? I mean, not terribly interesting. It's quite normal. I'm at home with my wife and cat, and we get up and we have breakfast, and I come to work, and of course I can fill in all those little details there. We sometimes talk about the dreams we've had over coffee, which I know a lot of people don't do, but are both interested in psychotherapy and Jungian psychology. So those things are quite important to us. We have a band as well called Fragile Self, which is constant thing we think about how we make music, how we link the visuals to the music, and that takes over our whole lives, really, in one sense. And there are lots of pragmatic things. When you see a creative person, you see their creative output. You don't see all the little details of the day, the dealing with, I'm talking about through history, not just today, all the things that go on to, how they have to deal with the mundane, how they, what they have to eat, all those kind of things, stuff that takes up their time. There's no concept to it when you see pieces of creative work, but of course those are all there. I mean, being a human being is quite, well, difficult is the wrong word, but it's quite a complicated thing. So my day is normal, but it's very difficult and very interesting and very wonderful at the same time as everybody else's, I think. Was that the kind of answer you're expecting? Or
yeah, no, fantastic. I love it. So 8 is around lifelong learning. It's a popular topic. How do you stay up to date?
how do I stay up to date? I mean, I think the lifelong learning, you tend to think of it being completely an external input into you. But to me, lifelong learning is looking inwards, in the sense that what drives existence, what can make you a happier person, what can fulfill you creatively. I don't tend to look at lots of other graphic design. I mean, I don't collect graphic design. People tend to think if you work in one area, you're kind of quite nerdy about it. But I would rather bring in things like literature, painting. And that sounds quite pretentious. What I don't mean is necessarily that there's direct influence, but more you get an idea or feeling from reading a book, or there's a sentence, and somehow it will come into your work. It will, for instance, if I was drawing a typeface, there would be a word that would be key to thinking about the way language was used, or maybe there's a line from a book that would promote me thinking about the name of the typeface. So it tends to be not looking at other people's portfolios or other people's work. I also don't like that kind of comparison, because it tends to make me, or I think it tends to make human beings generally quite unhappy. They compare themselves to other people. So I think it's quite important to first look at the self and find out what your soul really needs in terms of staying up to date. Again, it goes back to this thing of, if you do the same work as now as when 20 years ago, then you're not being honest with your soul. Staying up to date is how you find peace, really, rather than how you look at other pieces of design work. So.
Great. 9 is around tools. Do you use digital and analog tools?
Well, the digital is where I bring it all together, as whether it's design or music. But physicality is very important. I don't do letterpress so much these days, the old metal printing method. But to me, it was being able to hold the letter physically in your hand and understand it and touch the actual serifs, which may sound a bit ridiculous. But also, it couldn't be infinitely adjusted. You couldn't spend your time reducing or adjusting a letter form by 1.2.3 point You would really have to say this is it and deal with it. And those restrictions on any kind of technology, I think, are quite important. So that physical element, when using musical instruments, it's the same thing. It's the physicality of turning the dials on a synthesizer as opposed to working in software, which is quite important.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all brought together under digital because that's a good way to collate it all and edit. And what tools do I specifically use? Yes, computer. Am I a digital nomad? Do I run around doing work? No, I quite like sitting in the studio or sitting at home. I like the atmosphere, which puts you in the right psychology for doing something like that. So although theoretically it's possible, I don't go out of my way to be like that. I'm sure actually the best answer to that is what tools to use. I would say my brain. They're not, it's the most important thing, and that's all the other technique is in service of the brain and what it's trying to achieve.
Perfect. Halfway number 10, how do you deal with work-life or life-work balance?
I think, firstly, creativity just bleeds into everything you do, whether it's, going out and going for a walk in the park and seeing a piece of old architecture which will inspire something, going to an exhibition which still feeding you into work, but still would have some kind of aspect of freeing your mind and not thinking about it. Creative people don't have that work-life balance. Although what I think it's important to do is to definitely think about nothing quite often. Just whether it's through meditation or whether it's doing something quite banal, it's important to empty the mind of the problems it solves, to get rid of the chatter that's there, just to let things underneath come through, because that's what we all need. And there are various reasons for that. One is, of course, solving your own psychological problems, but also allowing creativity to come through for that spirit of the age, the spirit of the moment, to kind of ferment and be there. So you never stop being a creative person, but also you have to realize that absence is a very important part of creativity. Space is very important.
Perfect. Number 11 is, if you weren't doing what you do now, what might you be doing?
Well, it depends if you mean if I wasn't doing what I was doing now, this podcast.
Oh, yeah.
I would be working. But generally, I have of course, we all have frustrations in life, but I feel like I've been true to myself, and generally in life, got to a point where I've done what I wanted to do. Obviously, the soul is always searching for something new or something which makes it at peace, and moving more into doing my own work and to do collaborative work with my wife, I think has been really important, because as a graphic designer, often it's someone else's content. Now, often that content is amazing, fantastic. Working with people like David Bowie, of course, it's an amazing piece of creativity, but the last piece in the puzzle of doing, say, an album cover would be to make the music yourself. You control the visuals, you control the graphics, you control the typography, then to control the content, I think is the ultimate thing. Of course, there's beauty in restriction as well. There's beauty in solving a problem. You have to design an album cover, you have to design a signage system. How do you solve that problem? But in terms of purity and kind of absolutely saying what you want to say and what you want to deal with, I think doing your own projects is very important. That's what I've moved towards and what I will continue to move towards, I think.
And 12, what would you not like to do with your career?
What would I like not to do with my career? I don't know. I'm always open to working on new projects. I mean, when I was younger, I was very worried about selling out, of working for the wrong people. That's still a concern. So I tend to think ethically when we work with clients. I think that's very important, and it's on some the forgot in the maelstrom of general media. In that, as designers or as artists, choosing to work with someone, choosing to be commissioned by someone, is a political choice. Even if the content is political, even being a graphic designer is a political choice. You consent to be part of the market economy. So you have to be extremely careful about your responsibility there. You know, ethics in design are very complex. You know, this company owns this company, they commission this, but they're funded by this, they were bought by venture capitalists, 50 years ago, whatever. So you have to make your own decisions about who to work with, who not to, but generally you should be consistent. It's fine for some people. Some people have no worry at all about working with big corporations, but I always have. So I tend to keep away from that kind of thing and try and mainly work in culture, which I feel does a lot less damage. So that's what I'm not.
And do you have a favorite word, quote, or sentence?
This is the only question I really looked at because I wanted to make sure I got the quote right. But I love Hermann Hesse, and particularly the book Steppenwolf, which I read first when I was 19 years old. And to me, when I read it, I couldn't breathe. I really couldn't, because the words just spoke to me absolutely. And there's one of the things the book does really is gives you hope in life. You know, the main character is in despair when the book starts, and he learns, even though he's let's say a sensitive human being, and even though he's opposite of mainstream society, he learns how to enjoy life and to laugh and to be in the moment. And I can't remember the exact moment in the book that this quote is used, but it says, "Eternity is a mere moment, just long enough for a joke." And to me, that's really beautiful, because it's about the heaviness of existence, but it's about the lightness of living and the small amount of time we have. But also the laughter of the soul. And soul doesn't age, bodies age. It just really, whenever I read it, I smile. I think what a beautiful phrase it is. And now I'm going to say something quite strange. I met Kanye West at a playthrough, one of his CDs. It wasn't just me, there's quite a few people there, hundreds of people. He insisted on, at the end of the playthrough, of shaking everybody's hand when they left. And so I thought I must say something to him, which I think is important. So this quote came into my head. So I said to him, "Eternity is mere moment, just long enough for a joke." And he looked at me and he laughed. And then one of his security guards just pushed me out of the way. So that was the last time I used that quote. What a beautiful thing it is.
Lovely. And least favorite word, quote, or sentence?
I mean, I don't have one. I did try and think about that. You know, there are obvious people in the world whose voice irritates me. I mean, I can't listen to Trump speaking. I can't listen to Putin speaking, talking about today. You know, but I think we should all be open-minded. Even the words we don't want to hear are important words to hear, to understand either why someone's saying it or where we should go with our ethics and morals. So there isn't a least favorite word, quote, or sentence for me. Everything is permissible. You choose to accept or reject it once you've heard it, not immediately go against it. So
Great.
yeah, very important that we don't censor.
Great. And one word to describe yourself. What word do you choose?
What word do I choose? One word to describe myself. I mean, I don't care, honestly. I mean, I can't be bothered in a way because it's not an issue. Why would I describe myself? I mean, it sounds quite egotistical to try and describe yourself. So I can't.
Okay.
Not unique question.
Okay.
Yeah.
16, what keeps you up at night?
Well, the practical answer there is our cat, Lou, because he's always trying to sleep on top of me. That space where you're half awake and half asleep is so interesting. It's very emotional. Problems are magnified. Creativity comes to the fore. Even bad things are good things. Everything is relative. The nighttime is a really interesting place. Our band did a song called The Hour of the Wolf. It's from a quote from a film by Ingmar Bergman, where he talks about the very late night between 3 and 4 a.m. where most babies are born, people die, and our biggest nightmares are realized. I think that psychology is so interesting. So things keeping you up at night, it's actually very healthy, I think. And I like to be kept up at night. I mean, I mentioned before that my wife and I just discuss our dreams. I think they're amazingly fertile, creative things to take. And that psychology where you're half asleep, it's one of the most creative periods. It's about absence, where you have that space where you're not being externally stimulated and you can just have your mind wander.
Great. And do you have a dream you're chasing?
What's a dream you're chasing? I'm not chasing any dreams whatsoever. I mean, I'm completely not interested in that aspect of life at all. And I don't think I could say to be happy, but I don't think that's a dream. I think that's an ongoing process. I mean, even being happy all the time, it has to be relative to being unhappy or evolving. So I'm not chasing any dreams whatsoever.
What inspires you?
What inspires me? Now, everything, every single second, every single detail, every smallest animal, largest animal, every human being, every particle of Earth, how it all fits together. And I know I'm sounding terribly hippie in some way, how it all fits together is incredible. I think I've never ever been bored. I walk to studio, it takes 30 minutes, and every single day I see something different, and I see it on a wider level, but I see it in every footstep. And so I'm inspired. I use that time to think. I use that time to just observe the world. And I've never understood people who don't look at their surroundings for entertainment, for inspiration. They go around blind because everything is unique, everything is wonderful, and everything is inspiration, good or bad. So everything is the answer to what inspires me.
Great. And last couple here, any advice you'd like to share?
I mean, I'm not as presumptuous to think that I have knowledge to impart. But I suppose there are a few practical things. If you do have a particular thing you want to do, it's very, very easy to get distracted. And you won't get distracted in a this won't be possible kind of way necessarily. It will be in a little diversion. For instance, if you want to be a graphic designer, and then you start working in an associated place where you're maybe not being as creative as you want, it often happens that it's very difficult to divert back once you do something like that. You move into management or you move into a technical side. So you must keep your focus in the short term and in the long term, because life will have a way of putting other stuff in it and making it more difficult to going back to what you want to. The other thing is you need to have a sense of humor about yourself. If you take yourself too miserably, you will be miserable. If you take yourself too seriously, you will be miserable. If you take yourself too miserably, you'll be serious. I turned it that way by mistake, but it still works. The funniest thing in the world is yourself. And if you can't see that, you can't see the biggest joke around. You can't control what people think of you. And to deal with situations, humor is very, very important. Humor about yourself, just a little bit of distance and being able to laugh. Yes, I think those are fairly fundamental bits of advice.
Great. And finally, number 20, how can our listeners keep tabs on you? What's our call to action?
I wasn't quite sure what you meant by call to action. What kind of thing are you?
Is there a direction we should go in?
Is there a direction? You mean to find out what I'm doing? That kind of.
Perhaps, yeah.
On a very pragmatic level, you could visit our website, www.barnbrook.net. But, you know, how do they keep tabs on me? I mean, the best thing always is kind of meeting people by chance, or you're in a different country and somebody who knows your work will come up to you and start talking. I know that's not necessarily a very practical way, but it's the best exchange that happens. That direct energy. I mean, it's the same with work. When you have 50 people in between you and an artist or a musician, reinterpreting what the artist wants or reinterpreting what you want, it tends to make a job worse. If you talk to the artist directly, and that's what happened when I worked with David Bowie, it was very direct, it was him and me, then a sense of energy is created. And the fundamental thing for all creativity or for all civilization is that direct energy between people. That's what creates culture. So I think if you see me in the street, then bother me. I wouldn't mind at all. I'll enjoy the conversation and the discussion.
Okay, well, magical episode. Thank you so much for sharing this.
I enjoyed it. As I said, I didn't follow the questions too closely when you sent them to me, but I've learned quite a lot about myself here as well. So thanks for asking.
Great, thanks so much.